You're at a party, a work event, a school pickup, and someone walks up to you with that look on their face, the warm, familiar look of someone who clearly knows you. And you freeze, because you have absolutely no idea what their name is. Not even a first letter, not even a vague syllable, just a clean, white, empty space where their name should be. And so begins the performance. You angle your body. You laugh a little too warmly. You stall, and stall, and stall, desperately hoping someone else in the room saves you by saying it out loud first. We've all been there. But if this happens to you constantly, if you are a chronic, repeat name forgetter, I want you to know something important before we go any further. There is nothing wrong with you. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. Let's start at the moment of introduction. When you meet someone new, your brain is not relaxing and taking notes. It is doing an enormous amount of work simultaneously. It's reading their face, registering their tone, calculating social context, deciding whether they like you, whether you like them, and figuring out what you're supposed to say next, all at the same time. Your working memory, the brain's short-term mental workspace, located in the prefrontal cortex, is essentially juggling 6 things at once. And right into the middle of that chaos, someone hands you a single arbitrary sound. Hi, I'm Kevin. Kevin. And here's the problem. Kevin doesn't mean anything. It doesn't connect to any image, feeling, or memory you already have. It's just a sound floating there in a brain that is far too busy to babysit it. Psychologists actually have a name for this dynamic. In 1987, researchers McWeeny and Ellis published a study on what's now called the Baker-Baker paradox. Here's how it worked. They showed participants a photo of a man and told one group that he was a baker, as in, his job was baking bread. They told a separate group that his surname was Baker. Days later, the people who remembered his occupation recalled it far more easily than those who'd learned it as a name. Same word, completely different results. Because baker as a job activates a whole web of associations. Flour, bread, warm ovens, early mornings. As a name, it activates nothing. It just sits there rootless, with no connections to hold it in place. This is the core truth about names. They are semantically empty, and your brain, which is an extraordinarily efficient machine, preferentially holds onto things that mean something. Think about the last funeral you attended. You probably remember the smell of the flowers, the particular kind of silence in the room, who ended up crying, a sentence someone said that hit you somewhere deep, what you almost certainly don't remember, what was printed on the order of service, because your brain made a silent executive decision about what mattered. And it wasn't the printed text. It was never the printed text. Names, in that sense, are the order of service. Everything else about a person is the funeral. This is what most people fundamentally misunderstand about memory. It is not a recording device. Your brain doesn't store experiences the way a hard drive stores files. It stores impressions, emotions, patterns, fragments, and it prioritizes ruthlessly. High emotion, stored. Surprising, stored. Connected to something you already know, stored. One arbitrary syllable, handed to you at the exact moment you were trying to seem normal in front of a stranger. Good luck. Now here's where it gets a little more personal. A significant number of people who chronically forget names aren't forgetting because they're careless. They're forgetting because they're extremely in their own heads during social interactions. While the other person is saying their name, these people are internally narrating. Am I making enough eye contact? Was that handshake too firm? Did I just interrupt them? The name enters briefly, and then the internal monologue bulldozes straight over it. This is actually documented. In 1973, psychologist Malcolm Breener identified what's called the next-in-line effect. He found that people waiting to speak in a group, mentally preparing for their own turn, showed dramatically reduced memory for what the person directly before them had said, because in their heads, they'd already moved on. People living with social anxiety, or even just hyperactive self-awareness, are essentially stuck in that mode permanently, never quite here. Always half a step into what comes next, which means that when someone offers them their name, the very thing they need, they're already somewhere else. If that's you, here's the reframe. You don't have a memory problem. You have a preoccupation problem. Those are very different things, and they have very different solutions. Here's something worth saying to the people on the other side of this, the ones whose names keep getting forgotten. The sting is real. Having your name forgotten, especially more than once, it lands like a quiet message. You didn't matter enough to stick. That's how it feels, even when it's completely wrong. But consider this. The person who forgot your name probably thought about the conversation afterwards. They remember what you said about your sister, the specific way you laughed at something, that odd take you had that surprised them. They were there. They just weren't quite there for the name part. And this points to something fascinating about people who forget names easily. They tend to be highly associative thinkers. Their memory is richly contextual, built around stories, feelings, and emotional texture. Ask them what someone was wearing at a party 3 years ago, and they might actually tell you. Ask them the name of the person standing right next to them, and blank, because their brain was cataloging everything except the label. That's not a flaw. It's a particular cognitive architecture, one that is genuinely better suited to emotional attunement, deep listening, and the kind of presence that makes people feel truly understood. It just happens to be worse at the specific mechanical task of holding on to what someone was called under social pressure. None of this means you can't improve. You absolutely can. The most effective techniques all work the same way. They manufacture the associations your brain refuses to build automatically. When someone tells you their name, repeat it back immediately. Great to meet you, Kevin. This forces a second exposure, which dramatically increases retention. Connect it to something visual. Does Kevin remind you of someone else named Kevin? Does his face or energy match the name somehow? Build the bridge. If you can use their name naturally once or twice during a conversation, you're encoding it in context, which is exactly how memory prefers to work. You're not tricking your brain. You're doing manually what it normally automates, constructing a thread between a new piece of information and something that already has a home in your mental landscape. But here's what I really want you to take away. The shame around this, the quiet, persistent belief that forgetting names makes you careless, dismissive, someone who moves through the world without really registering other people. That belief is wrong. And it's worth saying that out loud, clearly, because a lot of people carry it without ever questioning where it came from. You are not absent. You are not dismissive. You are someone whose brain prioritizes differently. Someone who gets hijacked by their own internal weather, and sometimes fails at the single least interesting thing about a person, the arbitrary sound their parents assigned them, before they'd done a single thing worth remembering. The name was always the least of it. What you remember about people, the real stuff, the texture of who they are, that part is still there. That's been there the whole time.